Thank you so much for coming. I think there's 15 other sessions running at the moment, so thanks for coming to this one. We're here to talk about the New York City Department of Education's Computer Science for All initiative, specifically a student program we run called the Hack League. I'm Kylie. I work at the DOE on the Computer Science for All initiative, and
my name is Aankit Patel. I used to work at the DOE on this and many other things, and now.
Be heard on the live stream.
Should I wear a mic?
Should you just say
Will this mic be
it?
on here?
It might work. Try it.
Okay. Hi again. I'm Aankit Patel. I used to work at the DOE, and now I'm at CUNY Central working on teacher education in STEM fields.
So, just for ultimate backstory, in case you don't know, a hackathon is a competition in which people gather to work on a challenge, usually in a fixed amount of time, anywhere from like 1 hour, 3 hours to 24 hours or longer, and create a project to solve the challenge or solve a problem. So the DOE's Hack League, middle school and high school students work in teams. At the end of the events, we have them present their creations to judges, and then winners are selected for various categories. These pictures are from last year's hackathon, which we did inside of the council chambers at City Hall.
It was the biggest event at City Hall ever, and it was a bunch of kids hacking on stuff.
It was the first hackathon ever inside City Hall, for sure.
Yeah, that too.
So the Hack League is an academic competition where we invite middle and high school students to prototype technologies that would impact their communities. It's very driven by what students want to be learning and what students want to be working on. So just an overview of how we structure this program. We have teachers come to training to learn how to participate in the Hack League with student teams. Then we have teachers run competitions inside of their school. That way we reach as many students as possible. And then winners from school events move on to borough-wide events. Winners from borough-wide events move on to the city final. And then so we have one team from every participating school join us at these individual borough events. And then 3 middle school teams, 3 high school teams come to the finals at City Hall. This allows us to reach the widest number of students possible by starting in schools. So why did we start working on the Hack League? We're receiving anecdotal evidence from teachers that students don't feel connected to computer science necessarily unless they see themselves in the content and feel that there's a direct connection to the real world in what they're learning. And we also believed that a greater emphasis on being really culturally responsive would allow more students to not only want to take computer science, but to just feel connected to the content and maybe even want to pursue computer science even further after school. So together with BetaNYC, who's partially running this conference, we developed the Hack League curriculum. We did this through a design process where we invited teachers across the DOE to give us feedback on how past hackathons have been run, how their students were engaged with them, and then iterating on what we've learned from our hackathons we've run and other year-long competitions, like speech and debate competitions, for example. So the first year we ran it in this way, we reached 1,400 students, and then this year we're reaching over 2,100. And we are seeing the level of engagement that we wanted to see. So we're getting a lot of feedback from teachers that students are feeling really connected to what they're doing, mainly because, as we'll explain later, the projects are all very much focused on their own communities, and they're in some cases down to even their own block. And they're seeing themselves in the work and therefore feeling as though they can be participating in the CS or tech sector after being in school.
So what does all of this have to do with School of Data? And so we chose Open Data early on. You chose to work with BetaNYC and to use this as the kind of the way that students would engage in a more culturally contextualized computer science experience, because you can kind of see yourself in New York City Open Data. So later on, we'll talk about kind of some of the very specific tools we provided teachers and to get this stuff going at their school level. And that one of those things was 311 data, where you can literally call 311 and then see yourself show up in the data. And so we also, and from there we kind of branch that out and like, oh, well, students kind of notice things that are going on in their communities. They can learn how to, we can incorporate media literacy and have them read about things that are happening in their communities, and then give them, like, okay, here's your sort of problem universe, or your sort of areas where you can pull ideas from. Now let's engage in the things that we do in computer science class, where we analyze a problem, kind of try making some kind of solution and telling people about it. So that's kind of the connection to civic problems. And also why we chose to use open data. One, there's also this sense that New York City is one of the few cities with a really strong culture around open data. I don't know in terms of like how long the laws have been on the books in other cities versus New York City, but it seems like there's a good kind of community around it. And so to engage our students early on in understanding that this resource exists and that this is part of living in the city is them using this resource made a lot of sense. So the goal, I've been kind of touching on this stuff, but really equity is an important component. And when we talk about equity in the school system, we are not only just talking about having different kids with different backgrounds engage, because working in New York City school, you're automatically going to have 40 to 50% of the kids are going to be Latinx background, 20 to 30% are going to be Black. You're going to have a lot of girls engaged in computer science, but really then also just making them feel like they're included, that they have a say, that they have a way to engage in this on their terms, and then to also sort of add to the conversation. So it's not just about like what do the folks in the rooms look like, but how are they being engaged and what are they able to do? And that comes down to like hands-on learning, where they're actually building and working on stuff. And in this case, they really got to define what it was that they were working on. So yeah, what these values and the goals and the sort of a way of thinking about it really came out of this co-design process we engaged in our community, the larger sort of computer science education community, building something called the CS for All Blueprint, which was and is a guide for schools, teachers, but also community-based organizations doing this work on how to teach this stuff, the types of resources that sort of define how we'd like them to teach it and approach it, and what we'd like them to teach in relation to computer science. And some of the things are listed up here, but I think sort of the big takeaways and the things that you find on the blueprint is that we're not trying to just get kids to learn specific computer science, programming, software engineering skills. It's how to use a computer in a way that makes sense to them and is empowering. And so some of the specific things we did with the Hack League to make sure that happened was at each school, to be able to, in that big wheel that Kylie showed, where this events were running at the school level that led to then the borough and so on. We really, for those school level events to be successful, we made it so that teachers got to kind of adapt and decide how they were going to run that event in a way that not just engage the kids that were really great at programming, but also the kids that had ideas about things that could be done in their community. And they didn't all have to use open data, for example, or some of them could code, but they didn't have to. They could paper prototype, they could come up with lots of different ways to sort of initially present like what they were working on and show their sort of ideas. So we kind of opened the doors a little bit, opened the gates so that more people could participate. And a lot of that was based on sort of the initial co-design that Kylie talked about with Beta, where we identified that a lot of the memorable experiences that folks had with informal type learning, the ones that kind of became these references for them in later life about like whether they could participate. So like, we all kind of engaged in this too when we were thinking about, what are the types of cool camps or things that we did as kids. Those were all like whether it be science or something else, they were all really welcoming, inclusive. There's a lot of different people involved. It was just fun. And so we tried to make sure that that was the mood, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that so far.
So the theme that we try to generate students to start generate projects around is the better future. So we're encouraging students to look at New York City as it is currently and think through what can I do in my community to improve on quality of life or just solve a problem that I see regularly popping up. So we have students first identify neighborhood issues and inform their hypotheses around these issues with open data or any sort of data source. In fact, we've actually had some students run their own large-scale surveys and create their own data, which has been great, about the problems that they want to be addressing. Then at the borough-wide competitions, we encourage students to work further on prototyping the solution that they've identified that they want to pursue. And then at the final competition, we have students build out that tech solution a little bit further. We usually do that with like a secret ingredient of sorts. So last year we asked students to build in metrics to the prototype that they had created, and we saw some really amazing results. So again, we're really focused on making sure students are learning the design process through this journey. So we want students to really feel like what it would feel like to be a developer or a community organizer building a solution for their environment. And they're really focused on solutions that are issues and solutions that are relevant to them. And like Aankit mentioned, we're not focused on encouraging students to use any one tool or computer science language or platform. We're really encouraging them to teachers to broaden this opportunity for as many students as possible. So students can use assistive technology if they don't want to present verbally, or we're just trying to be as broad of a competition as possible, since DOE is so focused on equity, and Computer Science for All specifically is an equity initiative. So during that first competition, which we have teachers run in schools, students are, again, identifying an issue in their neighborhood where there's an opportunity to change and informing a hypothesis they come up with open data. So an example I wrote here is students might see litter on their block only, and they might do a data dive that shows them that the pickup schedule is different from their block than it is for other blocks in their neighborhood. And they would then highlight their solution for their teachers, or highlight what they've learned for their teachers and conceptualize a solution to this problem. So we ask students in this round to create a data story and examine further why this issue is happening, and then encourage them to think of a prototype or a way to prototype a solution to that problem. And if you don't know, a prototype is a simple or early version of a product. And again, since we're so agnostic to how students actually do this, we encourage paper prototypes or digital prototypes. So we have some students who want to jump right into coding and build out apps right away, but we also have students who want to paper prototype like what this theoretically could look like if it were ever to become an app. I'll show you some examples in a second. This is saying what I just said. So here's an example of a paper prototype. We didn't use examples from the Hack League to present for tech student data, but this is an example of something like what they would make in the Hack League. So students could theoretically build out an app on paper, explain to their teachers how they might see it working in real life. We also sometimes have students using storyboard templates to do similar things. Some students do transition their work to digital right away. And here's Scratch is a programming language that's really good for younger students, and they can just start jumping right into a tech solution, right?
Yeah. So once they've built these initial sort of, at phase one, are they building out the prototypes like that?
They could.
Okay, right. So really, the core of phase one is the students identifying an interesting topic and being able to tell a story around, what it is, what type of problem they're going to be addressing, and then a specific, I guess, one or two teams will come to the borough-based event where they have maybe like 2 to 3 hours really to try to turn their idea into some kind of prototype. And the key in phase 2 is that they are talking to hopefully a number of subject matter experts, folks from the field who've been invited to attend the event and give feedback. So here is, so I just talked about that first point. And I guess an example, I was just at the one, the Queensboro phase 2 event, and it was at Flushing Town Hall, which is a beautiful space. And I remember seeing a couple of projects. One was a group from an all-girls school that I think from personal experience were concerned with being able to find safe routes to wherever they were going. Like be able to map, like I'm going from point A to point B, I'm walking, what is a safe way for me to get there? And so they wanted to overlay data over a map in order for to be able to find, a safe route, and then potentially be able to have markers on the map where there are safe harbors. Like if there was an issue, here's where I could go if I needed to feel safe or needed help. Another project was so this was like where it was clear that they had gotten to making this game immediately, where they were concerned about the litter in waterways. So they had immediately used Scratch, that programming language you saw, to make a little game where you're picking up trash in water and saving the fish. And if you don't pick up all the trash, then fish start dying and you lose the game. We had to talk to them and challenge them, like, all right, where's the data that kind of shows the urgency of the problem that you're at? And so you'll have some students who are actively drawing on some kind of personal challenge that they have, and they're using data to try to build a story around it and build something. And then you have other students that kind of are observing things very clearly in their neighborhood and are then building like games and things to raise awareness, but need to be challenged to be able all right, well, how can you use data to show that this is an urgent problem? This is a problem that we as a community need to address, that you need to talk to, get people to buy into. So I thought maybe we could take a little bit of a break from Kylie and us talking and have some of you take a second, maybe think about, all right, is there something personally in your communities, your neighborhoods, that you would want to address? What types of data? Maybe you already know you have a project and you know of data that you use to kind of make your case, or is there are you thinking about here's where I would look, here's the type of data that I think I would need. So I'll give everybody 10 seconds to think about this, but it would be really nice if we could get a little bit of community participation here. Mm-hmm. Are there any brave souls in our small group that might want to share community problem, data that maybe backs that problem up, something you're working on personally? Jobs, you said? Do you want to say more? Yeah, I think if you press the... Yeah.
Okay, it's working. I'm just wondering how people can find jobs near me, especially for students or just high school kids who are interested to choose the career and just to see the stats.
So would you like government jobs, or you want to be more inclusive of different types of jobs that might be available?
Different type of jobs.
What neighborhood?
Looking what jobs are available in this neighborhood and just to see how competitive they are.
Which neighborhood are you talking about?
Oh, I'm talking upstate.
Okay. Well, I mean it doesn't have to be New York City. This
But the density of population in New York City, it's not such a big challenge, and also transportation system is well developed. But when you live in a rural area, it's very critical to find what jobs are really worth to pursue. Means education-wise too.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of a project students did last year. Students from something called a transfer school, which is for students who are kind of aged out of the typical school. They're older, they haven't graduated, they need to finish coursework, they already have lives and jobs. And so this group from a transfer school, which had a rotating cast of characters, were looking to find, a lot of these students need housing. And so they were, instead of using data, because the data didn't exist, like where is the housing, how do, like, and is it affordable, and is it going to be supportive for these students? They were looking to try to create a system where people could say, like, oh, I will host a student, and here's the language that I speak, and here are my, I think, like whatever other data, so that then it became a database for people for students in those situations to be able to find housing with somebody that they could communicate with.
I would elaborate if I may. Is it okay if I
Yeah,
will
yeah,
just
go
talk
ahead.
a little bit more? For example, the problem is bigger, and there is no job awareness in the region where I am from. So this region actually believes there is no technology jobs out there, and that's why colleges are not teaching technology, not offering. Hudson Valley? There are, but they're not visible.
Who can use the microphone, please?
So there's like a perception that these jobs aren't for students in the region, or that they're
Right. When
boxed
you
out
go
of
to
these
job
jobs.
fair, there is no technology jobs, IT jobs available on the job fair. They're just general labor
Yeah.
jobs available. So that's actually sends wrong signals to the population, to students choosing career path, right?
Yep.
That's one of the main reasons we focus so much on connecting students directly with industry experts in this round, because students physically see what could become a job for them down the road. And it's not just tech. We invite nonprofit agencies or government agencies, any sort of thing that's relevant to a civic issue that we might have seen present in a project that day. So it's been an interesting approach to seeing students literally their eyes opening in the room of like, oh, this job exists and it's actually right here and I can do it. In your case, maybe they can work remote and do, like there's just a lot of ways to see themselves in these opportunities by just presenting it in something like this.
Correct, and I'm so happy actually to report we brought up the first Hudson Valley Regional Technology Festival. So we had one-day conference and one-day hackathon, and we were able to introduce both sides of the market to each other. They were not aware about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the hackathon model often has been used as a way to sort of find a talent or suck out good ideas from the community, but it can be in this way used to kind of connect sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, each event turns into a little symposium of sorts, if you think of it like that.
Cool. So yeah, thanks for participating and for sharing your challenge. This subject matter expert thing, I think at the end we're going to share how, if you are all interested in potentially being a subject matter expert. I think we're probably set for this year, but hopefully there's a next year. But yeah, we have folks, like Kylie said, from nonprofit, from city agencies. Often those are the people that the students really need to talk to because they're trying to understand their problems better. And in 2 to 3 hours during a school day, it's not enough time to really create a full-fledged app, and so developers and industry folks are not necessarily as helpful. But if you're able to help contextualize and help students think about prototyping, it still could be very valuable to have people with technical knowledge there as well. So yeah.
So as we've been mentioning, phase 3, the citywide hackathon, which we've been lucky to do literally inside of City Hall. We encourage students to just continue working on their prototype at this event and build out a further tech element. So we've found this to be a really helpful place, again, to just connect students with the idea that what they're doing through the Hack League really matters. Last year we had 21 council members stop by the event, and so students could literally talk directly to their council member and say, look, this is a problem that literally affects my block, and you can do something about it, and here's what I think you could do about it. So it becomes a really powerful tool to allow students to see how what they're learning in school and the research they're doing independently can really make a real impact on their world.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the more important, go to the next slide, aspects of this, and that because there is sort of an infrastructure of open data and like specifically like feedback coming from the city, and that being a sort of there's a culture of that now within city government, that it made sense. It like was sort of followed that students now would have an opportunity to start hacking on projects and sharing those things directly with city council members. And so, it was intentional to work with BetaNYC on this project. They were really excited, and they specifically work a lot on the 311 data because they're working with community boards. So they built a tool called BoardStat. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but again, like they're working with the community, building out BoardStat to help folks that normally don't use open data in order to kind of make better decisions about their communities. And so, that for BetaNYC, it made a lot of sense to now, like, let's start working with the younger generation who may soon be community board members so that they better understand what the open data, what BoardStat is, but then also generally what the open data portal is. As we've been talking about, these types of the examples of that students of project students are working on them. Very few of them have been like specifically like, oh, this 311 data says blah blah blah. It ends up being much more just generally students and a better understanding. Okay, what is open data? What are the infrastructure? How can I learn more about my problem through researching it? And it may be on the open data portal. It may not be. So it was a great jumping off point. It was a great thing to ground ourselves in and make sure that there was a tangible tool we were giving to teachers in the community to get this going. But then, from there, kind of like we really ceded control to the students and they were able to run with it. And if we had just said like, no, you have to use 311 data. Where is the 311 data that you use? Why doesn't your project use 311 data? That would have kind of slowed down on the innovation, made this less inclusive. Instead, we said, all right, here's a way for you to start asking these questions and then let them go from there and didn't hold them back. Is there more to say about the open data? So this is the example of BoardStat, the tool that BetaNYC made for community boards. The good thing about this, when we started with teachers who were just like, what is open data? Why should my students care about this? And how does this connect with computer science? That was a big complaint in teacher professional development. It's like, when are we going to start coding? It's like, well, let's look at like what's going on here and like how did we find these numbers? How did we visualize these numbers? Like this all has to do there was software engineering behind it. Let's start with this piece and then like drill down from here. And teachers kind of bought into that to some extent. Especially when we gave them challenges like, okay, find specific things within this tool. And so once they started using the tool, it made a lot more sense to them. It was concrete. Cool. All right.
So if you are in the New York City area and you want to be a subject matter expert at one of our events, please contact Kate at beta.nyc. We'd really love to have you. Our students' projects are really amazing, and they truly do benefit a lot from talking to people like you, so we would love to have you. We can talk about Slack.
Sure, yeah. So you can follow more about CS for All in New York City on that Twitter handle. And then there's like a community Slack channel where about 1,000 plus people, mainly teachers, but there's a lot of folks from community-based organizations and industry that are on there sharing opportunities, events, and sometimes we're just helping teachers debug projects. So if you're interested in this community, it's a good way to start connecting directly with people.
So that's it. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to talk further.
I have a. Can we use this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested. So for kind of the winners or people with ideas that eventually would get adapted into the city's kind of ecosystem of analytics and tools, what's kind of the process for handing it off in terms of like who takes responsibility for that?
At that point, we've generally been giving it back to the teachers to follow up directly with, for example, in Staten Island, a project last year was students prototyping an app to keep track of deer-related car incidents. And the Borough President's Office was very interested in that because that's a very legitimate problem going on in Staten Island. So we sort of just let the Borough President's team connect directly with the teacher after us. And something similar happened in Queens with a council member there. Project was, took a really interesting take on a point system for getting kids more interested in cleaning and like putting their trash in trash cans, and an industry expert followed up directly with the teacher to keep it going.
Yeah, there was something similar with NYPD. There's also just like not. This maybe is a little bit of a call. Like if anybody maybe on the live stream is interested in this, like we would need more like time and money to actually do that type of follow up. Like it requires a lot of handholding, and I'm just not sure that there's a good way of doing that without a lot more infrastructure.
And like the teachers just know their students best, so they can like sort of like live on after the school year ends or whatever, you know.
Right, but it would be great if those students could get internships or fellowship or something like that to continue working on the.
Well, and I was wondering, is there any coordination between this program and Civics for All? Because it sounds kind of familiar, like similar, but.
Like within the DOE?
Yeah.
So the DOE is ginormous, so we're operating two different offices, although our teams have talked to each other. I don't know, can you say more about that?
I remember early on having the conversation, it didn't fit Civics for All, like specific things.
Mainly because I think this is like an extracurricular activity for the moment, and they're really focused on infusing civics into school-based curriculum right now. But there is definitely room for further collaboration there.
And sorry if I missed this at the beginning, but
Can you use the mic? Can you use the mic?
Oh, they're live streaming.
building on that last question, has there been discussion about including more of the open data and NCS for all work in the regular curriculum beyond the extracurricular pieces?
Oh, you can speak to citizens.
Yeah, so actually there's a session after this one. I don't know what room it's in, but we started building a curriculum that is a capstone, meaning it comes at the end of the sort of the arc for high schoolers, where they're using their project must be based on open data, and it's completely like all in the classroom. There's a couple of modules in high school and middle school where it's an option, but again, the larger sort of picture of CS for All is that none of this is quite mandated by anybody, the state or the city. It's really like an initiative. So it's not required, and it totally depends on the student and the teacher in the classroom.
Thank you.
That session is called Teaching Civics and Data, and it's after this in room 3114, if you're interested. Any other?
Sorry, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges you guys may have faced during the implementation? Like, for example, I imagine outreach to teachers may have been a bit challenging at times.
Yeah.
Kind of, I know you guys mentioned that a little bit. How'd you kind of do the outreach and that process?
So one of the main challenges that teachers face in implementing, I'll jump back to outreach, is that this is, as we mentioned, an extracurricular activity. So teachers are already stretched pretty thin, and time is not always something that they have to dedicate to a project like this. So that's another reason why we're so flexible with implementation, like particularly in that school-based round. Some teachers are running it as a club after school and stretching the design-a-thon over like several sessions over several weeks. Some teachers are doing it within their classroom, just making it part of their curriculum for the first semester of the year. And some teachers are running it as like a full hackathon on a Saturday and getting the whole school involved. So we've seen like a wide variety of implementation strategies there, because we try to let this be adaptable to the needs of teachers to like the fullest extent. In terms of outreach, luckily, CS for All as an initiative already has a touch point with so many teachers who have been brought into the computer science world and who are going through CS training. So we mainly market to teachers who have been trained by the CS for All initiative. However, we put it in any sort of newsletter that might reach a teacher because, again, stressing the equity component, we don't feel like you need to be a CS teacher or a student to participate. You can really learn so much of what we're talking about here along the way. So we'll put a call out in messaging that goes to all principals or on Twitter. We'll ask partners to support spreading the word. Basically anywhere we expect teachers to see, we will throw up a blurb when it's time to recruit in the beginning of the year. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For students that have less exposure to computer science and web design, what's kind of the process for kind of helping them during hackathons?
That's a great question. We're really, well, you can speak to this too, but we really like the paper prototype option for students who maybe can't jump right into coding, but have a lot of great ideas about, like, in theory, what a great app would be, like, or a great website or a tool that would be work for them. So at the last hackathon we ran this past week in Manhattan, we had students who didn't build anything, but who mapped out a full-scale, like, marketing technique for their theoretical website and drafted something on paper and thought really deeply about how to connect with the community, but it was very much less focused on, like, the technical elements, and then that team won because it was just a very well conceptualized plan. Can you have any?
Yeah, that's not just a problem in the Hack League. That's also just generally a problem in computer science classrooms because kids are coming in with a lot of different experiences, and we don't want to just kind of put the kids that have a computer at home that they've been hacking on ahead of everybody. So the way that we've kind of just generally in the blueprint tried to get teachers to assess students and structure their classroom is to wait. So there's the CS practices are analyzing, prototyping, and communicating as per our blueprint. And so actually building something is just one of three things, and analyzing is kind of like research, like being able to break down your problem, kind of evaluate and understand what it is, and then be able to talk about it and talk about what you did. So it's in a way we've, kind of 1/3 of it is building something, and it's more important that you're able to actually, like, understand and communicate what you've done. That's hard because the building something and that artifact is a lot easier to grade. So from a practical standpoint, it's easier for teachers to conceptualize and then work with students on that. But like Kylie said, we're hoping in a weird way how, like, the Hack League being able to introduce these ideas of how, like, how students are presenting and communicating and conceptualizing their idea is meaningful, and how that might also be something that they can assess and.
It's also proven to be a fairly good recruiting technique for students who aren't in a CS course right now, but their school offers one. A lot of times they'll participate in the Hack League and then not be in a CS course, but the following year want to enroll in one.
For the last stages of the hackathons where you actually have to build an app, is that by that point are most of the people who are in it, they know how to code already?
That's something we still embrace the paper prototype there. We said tech, but that could still just be, like, more theoretical than anything. There was plenty of projects at the last hackathon that weren't actually coded and still did really well.
Yeah, that housing app that I mentioned before, the student housing app, they were just building a form using Google Forms and then trying to turn that data into a searchable database, which really is just the Excel or the Google Sheets thing that's in the background. And it was just a matter of being able to kind of transform some of the data. So some elements of computational thinking and computer science are built in, but not at that same level of, like, having to spin up a web app.
Yeah, and that's, we didn't really touch on judging criteria, but that's usually reflected in the judging criteria as well. So for the second round, students aren't really judged on the app as much as they're judged on how much they iterated day of based on the feedback that they were given. So our students are expected to present what they're working on, but also explain how they grew from when they got there in the morning to when they're presenting at the end of the day. And so at the final hackathon, the secret ingredient last year was this metric. So students were just mainly expected to explain to the judges in the room their concept behind how they would build this into their app at the end of the day.
Can you talk about computer science for all, like as an initiative, and like what the goals are and other programs are, and like where that's going in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So Computer Science for All began in 2016.
Yeah.
It was an initiative of the mayor and the then Chancellor Carmen Farina. The goal of the initiative is to, by 2025, have every student in New York City learning computer science at least once in every grade band, so kindergarten through second, third through fifth, sixth through eighth, and then high school. We have an emphasis on making sure that students traditionally underrepresented in the tech fields get access to CS, so specifically Black, Latinx, and female students. We do that by training teachers to teach computer science, so existing teachers to teach computer science. So you don't have to be a CS teacher to come to CS for All. You could be an English teacher, come to CS for All and learn how to teach a course, and then implement it in your school.
There are currently no CS teachers. That's a new certification area in New York State, and like nobody's been trained that way. So there are some folks that have CS backgrounds that have found their way into teaching through alternative pathways. But then they may not know exactly like, what do I teach my kids? What is appropriate for, K-12 setting?
Yeah, and there's a lot of agency on the school's part in terms of how they decide to implement, if they want to implement just a unit into curriculum that they already have, or if they want to build out a larger like CS sequence across grade bands, and then, or a course. And when it comes to courses, they can choose, do they want to offer AP right away, or do they want to start with like an intro to CS or whatever it is. We offer training for all of the above.
Also make some of the curriculum, and all of the curriculum that's used in the city is on blueprint.csforall.nyc, that site that also has a bunch of resources and videos and things that kind of show what it looks like in the classroom, which is an important component of this because a lot of administrators and teachers initially like, oh, CS, yeah, we teach Microsoft Word and
We teach
keyboarding
Google
and
Slides.
stuff.
And the blueprint is also meant to be a resource that other districts can look at and take back to their schools and teachers. So it's not just specific to to New York City. Well, it's 2:26, so the next I see that there's a versioning open data sets demo at 2:30, which is kind of relevant to this if you want to go to that. And then again, the session that we were speaking of, the CS in the City curriculum, is running in the next block of sessions. So
I guarantee that one's going to be fun. The guy that wrote the curriculum has just got like a big personality. So yeah, I highly recommend that one.
What's it called again?
I lost it. Teaching civics and data, making open data and data science meaningful to students. And it's in room, oh my gosh, 3114. So it's more of a workshop than a session or a panel, yeah. Thank you. Thanks.